This podcast is sponsored by ebookit.com, self-publishing solutions for the independent author and small press. Visit us today at ebookit.com.
Welcome to the Toastmasters Podcast, the official podcast of Toastmasters International. Hello, everybody. This is Greg Gazin. Dr. Ralph C. Smedley is known as the father of Toastmasters, creating this organization 100 years ago back in 1924. Now, there are many things we know about this incredible man, but I've recently discovered that what's commonly known about him and Toastmasters in the early days, even prior to 1924, is just the tip of the iceberg. So we're fortunate to have with us today a man who is more than a wealth of knowledge, a walking encyclopedia, uncovering incredible mysteries on this incredible topic. In fact, he's been able to identify people in an unannotated, undated photo from 1925 that hung on the wall of Toastmasters International headquarters for almost 100 years. He's also discovered the exact building in Bloomington, Illinois, where Dr. Ralph Smedley started his first club. He's even arranged to have a plaque made and installed on the outside of the building. You could say that this man is on a crusade for all things Smedley and early Toastmasters. He is Bob Palmer, a retired elementary school teacher. He joined Primetime Toastmasters in August of 1973. And he tells us that was at the time that all the world was in Houston, Texas, at the Toastmasters International Convention, where they were in the process of voting on whether or not to allow women into Toastmasters. And we're certainly happy that they did. Bob's passion for historical research began over 3 decades ago, where he's uncovered materials that have been referenced and used for both the Toastmasters 90th, Toastmasters 100th, and of course, numerous articles. He has a blog called Toastmasters at 100.blogspot.com. He has a number of flip books, which he'll tell us more about. He continues to do numerous presentations, including more recently a live and on Zoom presentation for the District 100 Speakers Bureau on some of the untold history of Dr. Smedley. Coming to us today from Riverside, California, the Indiana Jones for all things Smedley, Bob Palmer. Welcome to the Toastmasters Podcast.
Thank you, Greg.
Bob, after a few conversations and some back and forth emails and some texts, I was debating whether I should call you Sherlock Holmes, Columbo, or Indiana Jones, and thinking that you're on a crusade, I went with the Indiana Jones. So I was just totally blown away with all of the incredible information that you've been able to discover on Dr. Ralph Smedley. So before we begin that story, tell us a little bit about your passion for Dr. Smedley came about and how you got started on this so-called crusade.
I joined Club 130 in Riverside in 1973, and I was surprised to see that the club at that time, chartered in 1938, had almost no history whatsoever. So I went down to the basement of the Riverside City Library where they had microfilms to go through. And I went through hours and hours of microfilm cassettes on a screen so I could see newspaper articles. I found that a club will be started here soon, 1938. The club is finally off the ground, 1939, and the club received its charter in 1939. All of that was way before digitized newspapers.
Wow. Dr. Ralph Smedley in particular, what was it about him that intrigued you?
I first got into researching Dr. Ralph Smedley at our 90th anniversary when Dan Rex put out the word that he wanted a history table for the convention in Malaysia in 2014. His exact words were, "Make it happen." Past district governor of District 12, Paul Clark, got a hold of me and asked me if I would help. And I went down to the Santa Ana History Room at the Santa Ana Library, where they had all the old Toastmaster magazines, and I thumbed through so many things. I also got on newspapers.com, a new subscription, and found lot of material that I could hand over to Paul, who actually went to the convention in Malaysia.
So a lot of this stuff was basically hidden and nobody knew about it until you uncovered it.
Yeah, nobody knew it.
That's incredible. I mean, obviously you can't go through everything, but tell us a little bit about some of the treasures that you found.
A lot of the treasures that I found about Dr. Ralph Smedley was when I got onto newspapers.com, I searched Ralph Smedley in Bloomington, Illinois, and lo and behold, the Pantagraph newspaper was online. And in 1975, they had a 5-day spread on Ralph Smedley 10 years after he died. And I copied all of the 5 pages and found out the amazing history of Ralph Smedley in his early days prior to when he started Toastmasters.
This is a perfect time to share perhaps some of his humble beginnings.
The family started with a girl in 1870 named Bertha, but unfortunately she died of diphtheria before Ralph Smedley was ever born. What was left in the family was his older brother Frank, and finally in 1878 Ralph Smedley came along. Ralph Smedley went to Illinois Wesleyan University. He graduated in 1903, and he seriously wanted a job at a YMCA in Bloomington, Illinois, but there weren't any openings at the YMCA in Bloomington. So he went to Peoria, Illinois, and taught English to foreign nationals at night at the Peoria YMCA. Finally, in 1904, the Bloomington YMCA had an opening, and he came back to Bloomington to become the educational director.
Wow.
He ran the boys' gospel meeting, which was a Bible study, about 14 or 15, 16 high school age kids. And he was impressed with the fact that they needed training in public speaking. So he took the boys' gospel meeting in 1905 and actually started his very first Toastmaster club. The very first meeting was a dinner. They charged 10 cents for the boys to get the dinner, and Mrs. Smedley and the General Secretary, George Sutton's wife, made all the meals and served them.
Wow. So this is even prior to 1924 then.
Yes, sir. It's 1905.
Okay. And where was this held again?
This was at the Bloomington YMCA in the Harbor Building on the corner of Market and Main in Bloomington, Illinois. The YMCA occupied the upper 2 floors.
So it wasn't called Toastmasters then. How was it sort of framed?
The speaking club that he made for the boys' gospel meeting in 1905, he wondered what to call it, and he asked the general secretary, like an executive director, George Sutton, what should I call it? And George Sutton mentioned the name Toastmasters, and everybody agreed that would be the name of that club.
I'm assuming at that point it had to do with giving toasts. That's probably where he came up with it, or is there a different story there?
No, I found out on my history blog, Toastmasters at 100.blogspot.com, that the name Toastmasters and giving toasts and all that went way back before 1905 in Illinois and in the Midwest, especially at the University of Michigan. They had a Toastmasters club as far back as the 1880s. So from Bloomington, he stuck with the name Toastmasters Club, and when he got transferred up to Freeport YMCA, he started a club up there and called it Toastmasters as well.
Toastmasters was discovered, or Toastmasters was created in Santa Ana. How did Dr. Smedley move west?
He started in Bloomington and went to Freeport. Apparently, they moved these general secretaries around quite a lot. Went to Freeport, Illinois, and then after a few years went to Rock Island, Illinois. And then later he went on to Monmouth, Illinois YMCA, where he was the general secretary. From there, he got stationed in San Jose, California, made the trip all the way out west to San Jose. And from there, he got his marching orders to report to Santa Ana YMCA to design and build it and become the general secretary. He got these marching orders in 1922.
Wow, 1922. I had read in Stephanie Darling's article that apparently the architect that was working on the building actually became a Toastmaster himself and a district governor.
Yeah, that was Frederick Ely, Orange County's premier architect at the time. He designed dozens of buildings that still stand in Santa Ana, California. And Frederick Ely later moved up to Oregon and was the first district governor in District 2 up there.
Oh, that's incredible. And I understand that this Santa Ana Y is in the Register of Historic Places.
Yeah, the Santa Ana Y opened in April of 1924, and it's on the National Registry of Historic Places.
So, Bob, tell us a little bit about how the Y came about and how that sort of transformed into what was to become Toastmasters International.
Well, Ralph Smedley, in addition to the speaking courses, he noticed that YMCAs had lots and lots of classes for businessmen to come in. They had thing on show card writing and accounting and public speaking and business development, classes for people right off the street in the local YMCA. He thought this would be a great idea to take Toastmasters and run it nationwide. Well, the very first meeting, of course, was October 1924 with what later became Smedley number 1. And in 1926, a second club, Anaheim Club number 2, started in 1926, and Ralph Smedley got a hold of the editor of the Association Men, the national magazine for YMCAs, and asked him to write an article about how great YMCAs would be for speaking classes. That article led to dozens and dozens of YMCAs across the United States starting speech classes.
And of course, a lot of those became Toastmasters clubs.
Yeah, quite a few of them.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the first club.
The very first club, club number 1, was called the YMCA Toastmasters, or they abbreviated it the Y Toastmasters. And it wasn't until a president in 1927 actually named the club Smedley number 1, and that actually stuck. And the beauty of the articles in newspapers.com, the Santa Ana Register featured weekly reports from the Toastmaster Club, who presided, who was the Toastmaster, who gave speeches and their titles. And from the old weekly reports like that, I found out the Smedley Club number 1 didn't meet at the YMCA in Santa Ana forever. They were only there from 1924 to 1928, and for some reason, they decided to move into some restaurants downtown so that they could have dinner meetings at restaurants.
Yeah, I think I'm just reading the article. I think it's, that was a Kettner's Cafe. I thought that would be interesting.
Yeah, Kettner's Cafe was one of them. Do you want me to tell you how there almost wasn't a Toastmaster club there?
Yeah.
Okay. The YMCA opened in April of 1924, and in May of 1924, you'll never guess who came down with typhoid fever, which was an epidemic in Santa Ana. It was Ralph Smedley. He came down with typhoid fever. He was 46 years old. Typhoid fever wasn't necessarily fatal, but he could have died. And if that happened, there never would have been a club number 1 later in October of that year.
That's incredible.
I've identified in the Santa Ana YMCA where exactly Ralph Smedley's office was on the first floor, and directly below the office down in the basement was the founder's room. It was the YMCA lecture room is what they called it in the newspapers, the YMCA lecture room. And that's where the very first club met on Wednesday nights in 1924. Later in 1958, for Ralph Smedley's 80th birthday, The city of Santa Ana honored him with a plaque in that room called the Founders Room.
Wow. So is that building, is that room, is it still being used?
The building still stands. It's been boarded up since May of 1991. And about a month ago, I got permission to go into the building, and I saw the actual location where the Founders Room was in the southeast corner of the building. All the walls have been torn down because back in the 70s and 80s, the YMCA underwent some major renovations. For instance, the basement where the Toastmaster Club first met, they turned that into a fitness center, knocked out walls and put in all sorts of things.
That's incredible. I'm hoping you took some pictures while you were there.
No, it was too dark.
Oh,
But I did find the actual room where Toastmasters started in 1924.
Wow. You know, I was reading up on some of the materials that you had shared with me, and there was one thing I came across, and I'm not sure if it was in one of your presentations or maybe it was in some of the written material you sent me. But when Toastmasters started, Dr. Smedley wasn't actually its first president, and I'm just wondering why was that?
The story of Ralph Smedley not becoming the first international president is quite a story, because in 1929, 1930, 1931, when they were meeting at the YMCA up in Los Angeles, after we had incorporated, they decided to have a vote for international president, and the Smedley Club was fully behind Ralph Smedley for international president. But the Anaheim Club number 2 went for J. Clark Chamberlain, and J. Clark Chamberlain was also hooked up with Santa Ana, San Diego Toastmasters, which became Club number 7, and he had a lot more support. I researched it and found out that every club only had one vote, and that was it. J. Clark Chamberlain beat out Ralph Smedley as the first international president, but at that election in the YMCA in Los Angeles, Ralph Smedley was the Toastmaster running the election.
Wow, that's incredible. What was Dr. Smedley like as a speaker?
The best examples are already online, old video recordings, movie recordings, and there's a few audio recordings. He was an average speaker, eloquent, good diction, good enunciation, getting to the point, not straying from the subject. He was an accomplished speaker.
And of course, his goal was to always ensure that people, no matter what their speaking level, work towards becoming better speakers, of course, and of course, better leaders. I was looking through some of the old material as well, and I understand that the meetings are fairly similar to what we have today, obviously, save for perhaps the technology. But back then, some of the roles were a little bit different. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Table topics actually started with club number 1, impromptu topics thrown around, and they called it table chatter back then. The evaluations, they were called critics. The evaluators were called critics, and the general evaluator, as we know it today, was the chief critic. Smedley Club number 1, I believe, had the very first club newsletter. It was featured in the Gavel newsletter that Toastmasters put out quarterly. It was called Tattles on Toastmasters.
Tattles, and what was in it?
I've never found an actual copy of the newsletter, but I sure would like to.
I guess that must be next on your list, right?
Yes.
In the opening, we talked about this unannotated and undated photo. Tell us about that story. I find that fascinating.
In 2014, at World Headquarters in Rancho Santa Margarita, I went into the history room just off the lobby, and I saw this framed picture of 15 men sitting around in the founders room at the YMCA. On the far right of that picture was Ralph Smedley. You knew that was him. But who were the rest of the gentlemen in that picture? I got a hold of Suzanne Fry, the editor of the Toastmaster magazine at the time. She met me out in the lobby. We both went into the history room and pulled that picture off the wall. It had been there for something like 90 years. And on the back, lo and behold, there was no annotation. Who were the gentlemen from left to right? The only one we knew was Ralph Smedley sitting on the far right of that picture. And down through the years, I've been on a feverish quest to find out who the gentlemen were. I finally found out that A, it was not Smedley Club number 1. B, it was a separate Monday night speech class that started in October 1925, and they had their graduation in December of 1925. And that's why the room, if you look at the picture, has Christmas decorations in it.
Wow. How long did it take you to find that? And how did you find it? How did you get that information?
Going back to newspapers.com, I just stumbled across on my search the YMCA in Santa Ana about 1954 or so. Someone had written an article and featured that picture, that unannotated picture, and documented all the gentlemen in there. And then I went and looked at the old Club Number 1 rosters and membership lists and identified about half a dozen guys from the Wednesday Club that were sitting in on this Monday night speech class, and they were in the picture on their graduation.
Well, that's some incredible sleuthing there, Bob.
Thanks.
So tell us a little bit about some of the resources that you've created. Tell us about these flip books. What are they?
Along the lines of history, I'd like to pass on to clubs listening to this podcast that they can really get into their own histories now because of digitized newspapers. If it's not newspapers.com, it's Genealogy Bank. Most of the states, like Illinois and Ohio and California, have a digital newspaper data bank, and you could look at old newspapers and research your club from when it first started. You can find the date that they had their chartering ceremony, the club that might have sponsored them, and you can find all sorts of information about your own club.
Now, you've put together these resources, some of the resources yourself. So what is a flip book and which ones have you created?
A flip book online is just a digital representation of whatever you want to put on the pages, and it's got a left arrow and a right arrow, and you can just flip through the flip book, flipping page after page like a digital magazine. I've created flip books just in the last year of my own Club 130. It's on our Free Toast Host website on the left menu. I created the 90-year-old Club 12 in Pomona, chartered in 1933, created a flip book for them. I'm working on Anaheim number 2, San Diego number 7, and of course, Smedley number 1. And the best place to archive your club history is right on your Free Toast Host website on the left menu. If you go to 130.toastmastersclubs.org, you can see my primetime Toastmasters history. I even got a picture of our charter, which was signed by Ralph Smedley in November of 1938.
That's absolutely incredible, Bob. Again, we've just touched the surface. We've just looked at the tip of the iceberg. Now, Bob, we can't go back 100 years, but perhaps can you describe Toastmasters in 1973? What was it like for you then, and what was it that got you to join Toastmasters?
In 1973, I decided to start working for my dad's carpet store. He had the largest carpet store in Riverside, California. And he says, if you're going to join my sales staff, you will join Toastmasters. And I go, what? And sure enough, in August of 1973, he took me up to Club 130, which was meeting at 6:45 on Friday mornings. He says, here's my boy, take good care of him. And I've been there ever since. Back then, they only had one manual, the basic manual. Women were not allowed to join, and it was all men. And I was surprised to see that some clubs didn't even feed you dinner or breakfast. It was just a meeting in a conference room somewhere. But I enjoyed the breakfast meetings.
I guess there are some clubs that are dinner clubs or breakfast clubs, and some of them are just regular meetings. I guess it depends on the club.
Yeah. And I really appreciate ever since COVID, when we went on Zoom in March of 2020, that was the first time I had ever been able to make a PowerPoint or a slideshow or a presentation using the new technology of Zoom and the share. Back in the old days, if we wanted to do a audio-visual presentation, there was no such thing. You had to make a poster and tape it to the wall in your meeting room and just point to it with a stick.
You can certainly see the evolution.
So we've made a dramatic paradigm shift.
Yeah. Well, Bob, this has been absolutely delightful. And folks, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to learn more about Dr. Ralph Smedley, I also encourage you to share this episode with your friends and fellow Toastmasters and your family. You can find the Toastmasters podcast at toastmasterspodcast.com, toastmasters.org, Apple, Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Now, Bob, before we wrap up, perhaps if people would like to reach out to you or they want to find some of these incredible resources that you've shared, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can check out the 2014 blog that I started, Toastmasters at 100, the word at, Toastmasters at 100.blogspot.com. I'm adding to it month after month as I find new materials. And then they can also get a hold of me on Facebook.
That's great. And we'll certainly put a link to all those resources in the show notes. And folks, you can also check out the Toastmasters 100 articles in the October 2024 issue of the Toastmaster magazine. There is also a print-only version, an extended version that's 56 pages. In addition, you can also check out Confident Voices, the story of Toastmasters. It's the new, beautifully crafted 454-page book on all things Toastmasters, and also the 45-minute documentary on YouTube, also called 100 Years of Confident Voices. And again, we will put links to all these resources in the show notes. And also in our 2 previous episodes, we talked all things Toastmasters 100 with Toastmasters Chief Executive Officer Daniel Rex. Bob Palmer, the Indiana Jones of all things Smedley from Riverside, California, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks, Greg.
Ever imagined a book written just for you? Introducing Books.ai. We're not just another bookstore, we're the future of reading. Our state-of-the-art AI adapts each book to your specific needs, creating a personalized masterpiece. Visit Books.ai now, that's POOKS.ai, and use the promotion code SPOTIFY for a whopping 50% off. Books.ai, your personalized book awaits.